Wyndham Clark is a two-time U.S. Open champion. That sentence should feel clean, celebratory, final. But it doesn't. Because 5 days after Shinnecock Hills, something happened that no major champion in modern golf history has ever faced. Not a journalist questioning his win. Not a frustrated fan tweeting into the void. Something that came from inside professional golf itself, from people who walk these fairways every single week, and what they said is now impossible to ignore. The trophy is sitting on his shelf. The USGA has said nothing, and the golf world is having a conversation behind closed doors that just got kicked wide open. Here is what you need to understand before anything else. This story did not start last Sunday. It did not start at Shinnecock. What is being said right now, by the voices now speaking publicly, connects to something much older, something that kept getting filed away, cleared, forgiven, and forgotten. Until now, because the people demanding answers aren't angry fans, they aren't keyboard warriors, they are people whose names carry weight in this sport. And the question they are asking the USGA is one that golf has never had to answer at this level before. Personally, I think when voices like these go public, not privately, not anonymously, but fully on record, that is not outrage. That is a verdict. I want to know if you feel the same way. Drop a comment right now. Does Wyndham Clark deserve to keep that trophy? Because by the end of this video, you will have everything you need to decide. If you are not subscribed yet, do it now. This story is not finished. The people now speaking out didn't just appear overnight. Something pushed them here, and it started long before Shinnecock. To understand why this exploded the way it did, you have to go back to Saturday afternoon at Shinnecock Hills. Round 3. The championship is not yet won. Clark holds a commanding lead, the kind that makes a final round feel like a formality. And then comes the 17th hole. His tee shot on the par 3 goes left, badly left, into thick fescue, the kind of rough that turns a routine par into a scrambling nightmare. A TV camera platform sat near his ball, close enough that Clark called for a rules official, close enough to qualify for free relief under USGA rules. The official arrived. The drop was approved. What followed was captured on live television and replayed thousands of times within hours. Clark cleared loose grass from his drop zone. He dropped the ball. It rolled back toward the camera stand. He dropped again. It rolled back again, both times returning to the obstruction, which under the rules entitled him to place it exactly where he wanted. A USGA official stood beside him through every single step, watched every movement, said nothing. Clark chipped onto the green, saved par, extended his lead, won on Sunday. Now here is where the temperature rises, because if this were the only incident, the golf world might have moved on by Monday morning. Controversial drop. Official approved it. Case closed. Except the golf world didn't move on, because what aired on that broadcast didn't just spark debate, it broke open 2 years of silence. What the voices speaking out are saying is not simply that Clark gained a ruling on the 17th hole. They are saying Shinnecock was the final straw. That drop was not an isolated moment. It was the most visible moment in a pattern that stretches back to 2024. And the people now speaking publicly had been watching that pattern build, incident by incident, ruling by ruling, long before last Sunday. Go back to Bay Hill in 2024, Arnold Palmer Invitational. Clark's drive found thick rough on the 18th hole. Cameras caught him placing the heavy flange of his wedge directly behind the ball, not lightly, not briefly, but pressing into the grass with force multiple times. The ball appeared to move. Rules officials reviewed the footage in the scoring tent and cleared him. Brandel Chamblee, watching live on Golf Channel, did not stay quiet. He said the ball clearly moved. He said the club was not grounded lightly. Then he asked the question that has echoed through professional golf ever since. What does a tour player have to do to get a penalty? Nobody answered that in 2024. The tour moved on. Then Clark said something in the aftermath that people inside this sport have never fully forgotten. His own words, in his own interview. He said, directly, "Not that I was doing anything wrong prior to that when the cameras weren't on us." That sentence landed differently for people inside the ropes. Whether he meant it as a throwaway line or not, those words planted something, a seed of doubt that did not die. Because 14 months later, at Oakmont during the 2025 US Open, something happened that had nothing to do with rules and everything to do with character. Clark missed the cut. His week was over, and in the locker room afterward, he destroyed 2 antique wooden lockers in a rage, Oakmont banned him from the property. The conditions to lift that ban included paying for the damage, making a sizable charitable contribution, and enrolling in anger management therapy. A prominent USGA official privately told people inside the sport they would ban him from the following year's Open entirely. That official did not follow through. Clark returned to Shinnecock and walked out as champion. Every time the door closed on this story, Clark walked back through it. And what happened 1 month before Shinnecock made that pattern impossible to dismiss? At the CJ Cup Byron Nelson in May 2026, Clark requested a mudball ruling that Golf Digest described as delivered with the ceremony of a man filing a tax appeal. Fellow competitors watched, viewers noticed. The feeling inside the sport that Clark operated in a space between the letter of the rules and the spirit of them quietly hardened into something more serious. Then came Shinnecock, the 17th hole, the drop the whole world watched, and the morning after the trophy ceremony, a PGA Tour caddy posted a video publicly. Not a media personality, not a studio analyst, someone who carries a bag on the same tour, reads the same rough every week, and understands better than almost anyone what it looks and feels like to genuinely test a lie versus deliberately improve one. His name is Brent Henley. He posted the footage and wrote the words that cracked this story open. He said he believed Wyndham Clark cheats. The footage he pointed to showed Clark in the fescue during the championship, rehearsing a practice swing directly behind his ball, then stepping into that exact same spot to play his shot. Under Rule 8 of the Rules of Golf, players cannot improve their lie, their stance, or their line of play. Taking a practice swing to gauge conditions is permitted. The line between those two things, in thick fescue, at a major, on a Sunday, is dangerously thin. A tour caddy watched that footage and decided the line had been crossed. Henley's post didn't stay quiet. Within hours, it reached people whose words carry real consequences in this sport, and they started speaking one by one. Brandel Chamblee resurfaced his 2024 question with full force. 2 years, same player, different major, same outcome, cleared again. His frustration, this time barely contained, made one thing clear. For him, this was never a new story. It was the same story, playing out again, at the highest possible stakes. Michael Bamberger, one of the most respected voices in golf journalism, delivered the line that became the moral center of this entire conversation. He wrote that when a player pushes the rule book to his advantage at the expense of the rest of the field, that is not bending rules. That is violating everything the game actually stands for. That phrase, violating everything the game stands for, spread across golf media within hours, because it captured exactly what the people speaking out were feeling but struggling to articulate. This is not a technical rules debate. This is a question about the soul of the sport. Eamon Lynch went further and aimed directly at the institution. He called out the USGA by name, the governing body whose official stood beside Clark on the 17th and watched every single movement without a word, and argued that their repeated silence makes them complicit. Lynch went as far as calling for future major championships to be stripped from New York venues entirely, a sweeping statement that showed how far this conversation had moved beyond one ruling on one hole. Mike Weir, a Masters champion, spoke about what he witnessed at Shinnecock from a different angle. He said he had never seen an American player on American soil treated the way Clark was treated during that final round. Police removed spectators throughout Sunday. Fans cheered Clark's mistakes and fell silent at his good shots. Weir said the behavior crossed a line, but his words cut in both directions, because a crowd turning that completely against the champion of their own national open raises its own uncomfortable question about what that crowd instinctively felt they were watching. Scottie Scheffler, playing alongside Clark in the final pairing, chose his words carefully and publicly acknowledged that the atmosphere became too much. He said being in the arena is not for everybody, and that Clark showed something real by handling both Shinnecock and the crowd. Coming from the world number one, that observation carries weight, and it sits uncomfortably beside every other voice demanding accountability. PGA Tour players in the field, speaking privately to reporters after the tournament, described a locker room atmosphere that was far from celebratory. Multiple competitors questioned the 17th hole ruling directly. Others pointed back to Bay Hill. One described the cumulative feeling inside the tour as something that had been building for a long time and finally found a place to land. Golf Channel analyst Damon Hack noted that the conversation after this U.S. Open was unlike anything he had covered at a major, not because one thing happened, but because the volume of credible voices speaking simultaneously created something that felt less like post-tournament debate and more like a coordinated reckoning. Former tour player and analyst Andrew McGee said publicly that the pattern of Clark finding relief, finding rulings, and finding his ball in better positions than his shots deserved had reached a point where silence from fellow competitors was no longer possible. His words pointed directly at what many inside the sport were privately saying, that Clark had spent 2 years operating at the very edge of what the rules allow, and that Shinnecock pushed him over it. Writer and longtime golf insider Bob Harig described the post-tournament atmosphere as one of genuine institutional crisis, not because the USGA would reverse the result, but because the governing body's silence in the face of this volume of credible criticism had damaged its own authority more than any single ruling ever could. That is 11 voices, caddie, analysts, champions, journalists, competitors, 11 people from inside the sport, not from the stands, not from social media, all pointing at the same thing from different directions. And the USGA has still said nothing. That silence is now the story inside the story. Because golf is the only major sport on earth built entirely on self-reporting. No referees policing every inch of every hole. No video review system catching every movement in real time. The honor system is not a quaint tradition. It is the foundation the entire game stands on. When the same player keeps finding himself at the center of rulings, cleared every single time, never once raising his own hand, and those clearances keep arriving from officials standing right beside him, something in that foundation cracks. Clark addressed everything publicly after his win. He said the crowd definitely didn't want him there. He said some of the grief since Oakmont was rightfully deserved. He said he hoped to win back fans he had lost. And those words showed something genuine. A man fully aware of what his reputation had become, trying in real time to rebuild something that kept taking damage. But awareness is not the same as accountability. And for the 11 voices now on record, the question was never really about the crowd or the lockers or even the wedge at Bay Hill. The question was always simpler than that. In a sport where the rules only work because players choose to honor them, did Wyndham Clark honor them? The USGA will not strip the title. No mechanism exists to reverse a result for rulings cleared by officials in the moment. That door is closed and will not reopen. Drop a comment below right now. Clean champion or the most controversial US Open title in a generation? The golf world is split and your verdict matters. But the conversation this championship opened, about the rules, about the honor system, about what it means to win golf's national title in the modern era, is not closing anytime soon. The trophy stays on Clark's shelf. The questions stay on everyone else's lips. And the sport that built itself on the idea that a player's word is the final rulebook is now being asked, loudly and publicly, whether it still believes that. Subscribe now, because this story has more chapters coming, and you need to be here when they arrive.